আমি চিনি গো চিনি তোমারে ও গো বিদেশিনী তুমি থাকো সিন্ধু পারে ও গো বিদেশিনী ও গো বিদেশিনী
Rising Asia Journal and Rising Asia Foundation find great pleasure in welcoming everyone to the launch of Brinda Crishna's memoir about her grandmother, In Search of Shobha. With a master's in special education from the University of Manchester, Brinda Crishna has a monumental 35 years of experience in the disability and development sectors. She's worked with a multitude of international and bilateral agencies and NGOs, including ADB in Vietnam and Cambodia, UNICEF in India and the West Indies, DFID, IFC, World Bank, British Council, Cheshire International, Handicap International, and Save the Children. She established the first NGO in Assam to provide services to multiple disabled people in the Northeast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very cool welcome to this wonderful Freemasons Lodge where the air conditioning works so well. So Rising Asia Journal and Rising Asia Foundation is a fairly new organization that does book launches, and we have begun doing them. We did one a few months ago, and this is our second, and there are more to be planned and are on the way. The organization is an international one in character. We have an editorial board with professors from different countries, the West as well as Southeast Asia, and our niche area is the Eastern world. You know, we can't specialize in everything, so we look at the Northeast of India, and Southeast Asia, China, Japan, and the Koreas. And based in Calcutta makes us unique, as some diplomats have commented, because most of these think tanks are in Delhi. And they say, but you're in Calcutta, which means that, you know, you're ideally positioned on the edge of a diving board, looking out to the Eastern world. So that's what we do. So with those few words about the foundation, I must say that we are absolutely delighted to be associated with Brinda Krishna's historical memoir based on historical research, which you know, she has gathered together letters, over 100 years old letters from her grandmother, which form a part of a family archive, in that she found the letters in a box, a military box if I'm not wrong, which was opened, and then these letters came out. They were written in Bangla and written in an archaic Bangla, if I'm correct, which needed to be translated accurately, and she began a long process of doing that. And this reminds me of my own father, who fought in the Second World War as a young captain for the British Army, and he joined that war because he wanted to fight the Nazis. That's what he says. But I think he wanted to, a young man needed money, because, you know, young men joined armies to stay out of trouble and to build a career. And he did that. So with those few words, let me welcome the author, Brinda Crishna, up to the stage. And thank you for that applause. Let me now ask our panelists, two professors. We thought we will come out all guns blazing. Why have one when you can have three? So for the price of one, we have three professors. Professor Subhashree, who did her doctoral work at Rutgers University in America and currently teaches at Loreto College. Dr. Professor Chaitali Maitra, who teaches at Bethune College, which has a connection with Brinda's book. and our curator and anchor for the evening, Dr. Julie Mehta. Thank you so much.
Top of the evening to everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you on this hallowed occasion and in such a hallowed place. We were just talking before all of you came in, and it seemed to me as if it couldn't be a better venue. And all thanks to Vivek and the author, Brinda Crishna herself, and your wonderful nephew, right? Friend, who got this together. You know, I was just thinking, today is Prathama, today is the first day of Devi Paksh. We have such wonderful people here. I would like to actually recognize, as they say, a few of them. One is whom Brinda keeps mentioning as BM, who is here, who is the translator. Magnificent. I'd like to acknowledge very much the spiffy, on point, versatile editor of her book, Anshum Katyal. We go back many years in Loreto, and we have with us Professor Arundhati Ray, who's been head of the department of many things, and an inspiration to us of education in Loreto College, and many of you. So as I was saying, catching that thread, it's a very auspicious occasion because it is very much the first day of Devi Chandi, Devi Durga, Devi Mahishasuramartini. Whether you look at it from a spiritual point of view or, as cultural or religious, it's iconic. Because what Brinda's grandmother, Shobha Ghosh, was doing so many years, decades ago, 100+ years, is what we are benefiting from now. And before her, there were women like Sarala Sundari Devi, Rosho Sundari Devi, 1809 to 1890 born, and several others, who did not have anything less than shackled patriarchy stopping them from even learning the Bengali alphabet. So people such as Sarala Sundari Devi and Rosha Sundari Devi, the generation before, a generation and a half, as my historian husband Harish would say, before the advent of people such as Shobha Ghosh, were by night at the risk of being beaten, studying the Bengali alphabet, self-writing their autobiographies in lamplight. So we here today are standing, all of us, on the shoulders of those women. And it is no mean task, I can tell you. When I was schooled by force, I would say, as a post-colonial student doing my PhD in Toronto, I was quite stupefied that I had to study Parthu Chatterjee's Women and the Nation. And there I found that Sarala Sundari and Rosha Sundari were names that my German, my Anglo-Canadian professors expected me to know very closely and actually give my views on them. I had so little to say because feminism is always tattooed on our brains as something that came out of the West. And much before our guru, our current guru of feminism, Gayatri Spivak Chakraborty, these were women who were walking the talk. So before we kick off this evening, I would like to thank Brinda for doing this, literally for transforming one genre into another, for transforming letters into a memoir. Again, I think it's a great honor because it allows us to understand the kind of labor. 10 years, was it, Brinda? Yes, 10 years of labor that went into thinking, configuring, conceptualizing, and then transforming it into another genre. So let's start the evening, and I am very grateful right at the start that I have several scholars here who have been my erstwhile students who have read the book, and others too, who have bothered to go through the memoir, and I'm expecting we will have a really strong, engaging, lively session with Brinda and all of you. Okay, so Brinda, we'll do a round robin. So I'll go first, and then Subhashree and Chaitali, and we'll keep the conversation going till we think the audience feels, okay, you've said enough, so shut up. So then we'll open it up to them. Okay, so the first question to you is, to open the evening today, when you received this, as again Harish and I keep saying, this is your grandmother in a suitcase, how long did you think it would take you once you decided you had to write this story? How did you configure this?
I think I didn't realize the enormity of the task that I had taken. They were something that my mom gave me and said, okay, these were letters written, these belong to your Baba, and I think these are letters that he wrote to his mother. And so I brought them home. And I think and then, we were still very busy, and the last of the kids was still home, so they laid on my desk for a long time. And of course, then the kids left, and I had the time and the space, and I kept feeling terrible because I hadn't looked at these. Then when I actually looked at them, and my friend Indrani was with me, I really miss not having her here today, and we opened it, and I said, oh, these must be, And she said, no, these are not from this, what was your grandfather's name? I said, Shibesh. No, these are not from Shibesh. These are from someone called Utshavanando, and these are letters that he's written to her. And Brinda, he's called her Pranodhikari. Do you know what that means? So, of course, being a good old, not so much skilled in Bengali kind of person, we then went into it, and she explained what it meant. I said, keeper of my soul, oh my God, what's this? But I didn't realize the enormity of what I'd taken on, because it wasn't just reading the letters. The letters, first I had to find someone who could read the letters in the way that they were meant to be read. And then when that happened, and we began to slowly understand, I realized the enormity of what I'd found. And this book, for me, has been like a discovery of myself as well, because we grew up in very anglicized families where we never spoke Bengali at home. I can't even read and write the language. We basically spoke English. That's what our mother tongue. We grew up like that. We grew up all over the country. I only came to live in Calcutta after Vivek and I got married. So, and my kids, they used to say, where are we from? And you'd say, where are you from? You're Indians, you're here. No, but are we Bengali? Or are we from the south? Or where are we from? And it was never quite, when they're young and you're young, you don't think about it. But I think when you get older, you suddenly feel that urge and that need to say, actually, where are we from? And the letters were more than just letters. They then became a way of understanding and unraveling who I was. That was the primary thing. I don't know how much I've cried, and Vivek has had to put up with this totally emotional person who would read this and say, oh, God. And then, of course, the need to understand. And that's all we had, the letters. For whatever reason, we didn't know anything about her. She died soon after my parents were married, so there was no coming. And it's been that. It's really been a journey, really.
So before I turn this over to Subhashree, I just want to make a wicked comment that love letters and her love for Uchavanando. That apart, she was a woman of substance to the extent that that man might have wanted to woo her for 10 years. But she still made her own decision that this was not the right man to marry. So this was a woman who was very independent in character. You'll hear more about that soon.
I was, as I was going through the narrative, I was thinking about the form, because you have mentioned the process, the 10-year-long journey, as it were. But how did you come up with the structure? It must have been a huge challenge where to include the letters, how much of the family saga to put in, because it was more of a discovery of your roots, of different parts of the family that you were not aware of, meeting new members. So where exactly to put them? How much to put in historical details? So I really want to know about that conceptualization.
Okay, so to be very honest with you, it wasn't quite as organized. I needed to write something that I could write for my children. I needed to write a book which my 4 girls could say, my sister who's sitting here could say, this is where we came from, this is who we are. So that was the objective. There was no question of, I'm going to write this. But there was not question of a book for publication or anything. It was about getting together an understanding of my roots. So that was what it was. So as the letter started getting translated and I started to understand the enormity of this, I sort of put it into, the first thought was that it will make no sense if I just write these letters and translate the letters and publish them like that. It makes no sense. It only makes sense when you give it in the context, because then there's no judgment, because you have to understand the context, the time in which they were written. So there's no, you don't trivialize the relationship that existed between Shobha and Uchavanando and between Shobha and Shibesh. You don't make it something small and grubby. It wasn't. It was uplifting it. But then to do that, I had to understand the times as well. So I did a lot of reading. And so there were 2 people who totally took me through the process as well. So one was BM, who did not want to be known. And it's fine, because she actually created this life force for me, gave me a context of where I was, helped me read and rationalize. Watch Ghore Baire. Have a look. Look it through. That's the time you're talking about. So then you watched Ghore Baire. Then you went behind. Then you read about Tagore. Then you read about the Brahmos. Then it sort of began to get an understanding of what these relationships meant to Shobha. So that was one aspect of it. And as it came, I wrote it down. And then, of course, I gave it to Anjum, who then put it into the order it's in, and so gently, without saying, oh, for God's sake, you've repeated this 20 times. I know it. I'm reading it, and I'm saying, oh, didn't I say this before? Oh, this doesn't sound... And I wanted it to be more than just a story. I wanted it to be something that was special and precious. There was no talk about publication. I wanted it to be something that I could pass on. So, and none of my kids are here. They all live all over the world. So that was so it then came into, then I realized that what I would like to do is that I would like to talk about the journey and then add to it Shobha's story as it emerged. So I tried to weave that in the journey, and then of course Anjum put it into a much more readable kind of context. In terms of the flow was much better after she'd seen it. But I was very clear on that. You had to say all that I was doing, and you had to see the picture that arose of Shobha as well. Yeah.
So taking it from there, and I'm going to push the envelope to Chaitali now. But when we read this as a personal journey or a personal history, and we intersect it with the national history of our times, where women were beginning to get the voice, they were being educated. Chaitali is from Bethune, and Boroma.
Thakurma was also from Bethune. So
and she was 1915, first batch of women. So it gives, I think, someone like Harish and I, from the scholarly point of view, hope that because it's a personal history, it can be read concurrently with what is on the agenda and the syllabus in North American and now even in our universities. I have students here, I'm so excited. Mohini and Hussaina were my MA students, and we actually studied the stories of Sharala Shundari and Rasha Shundari Devi. So if my dream would be for this book's journey to find a way into the academy, whether it's in Calcutta University or at the University of Toronto or Columbia, as a text that would be read in conjunction to a theorist like Partho Chatterjee. So let's hope, sooner than later that happens. Chaitali.
Congratulations, Brinda, for being able to create such a strong narrative from letters which many of us see lying in different corners of our home, maybe in a box for you, but you have created something which is outstanding. Because you've told us a story or given us the probabilities, not really a story, of a moving time of so much happening at a particular time, centering the life of Shobha. Now, with the letters, most of us here have seen the books, many of us have read it. I would like to begin by mentioning the picture of Shobha trying to cut vegetables in the boti. That picture has nothing really to do, nothing in reminiscence with the graduation that happened in 1915. I graduated 85 years later from the same college. And the fact that she was able to contribute usefully to the journal which came out from Kanpur, and she was the principal of a school, which meant she had a lot of administrative skill. These were also rife times where the nationalist patriarchy was making the women of the times getting slowly interested in the political upheaval that was going on, bringing home, of course, names like Ghore Baire, Strir Patro, I feel like saying, and also Prothom Protishruti, where Shotto is burning her clothes to sort of make the pulse of freedom become more and more pronounced. So did you find any link with all this that was going on with the character that you found in Shobha?
Actually, we were supposed to meet a couple more people who told us, I did speak to one of them on the phone, a lady in Aligarh University, in fact, who was also one of her students, who used to say how she would stand by the wall of the school and talk about that women in their own ways needed to also take part in what was happening in the country around at that time. But unfortunately, I couldn't include any of that in the book because I couldn't meet her, and there was no way that I could corroborate that particular fact. But the fact that my father had such a strong sense of love and I suppose you can say patriotism. It's an old-fashioned word, but patriotism for India. We grew up with that, and I think a lot of that was because she too had that sense, and the little bits and pieces that he would talk about her. He was so proud of the fact that she had been a principal. And I realized that while reading, while beginning to get an understanding and talking to the few people who actually knew her at that time, we realized that she was much more than just the principal of that school. She believed in girls' education. So there's that lovely bit about her going to the homes of Muslim families in the afternoons to convince the parents to let them send their daughters to school. And she made this little thalagari, square one, on which they would all sit, and there was a parda around it, and the horse would bring this carriage to the school, it was a little school then, and then they would, the image is so clear because the lady who told me about it was very much one of her students, and that they would hop off and they would go up the stairs to the class, and she would be standing there, and then they would whisk off their burqas and hang them on the thing and then go back to class. And the next day they would be, and the afternoon they would go back home in the same way. But then there was also the fact that when the inspector of schools wanted to come to see the school, she said, sorry, I have committed to these Muslim families that the girls cannot come. So do you think you want me to do that? And do you want me to stop all that I've been trying to do? So she actually went to the office to tell him that. And she said, if you want to come, you need to come after school. And that's what he did. So there's a grit, but there's also this tremendous, her whole character is one of such tremendous respect and strength to duty, the concept of duty, that this is my responsibility, this is what I have to do, of being selfless in that, actually, I think. And I think that's what comes through. Because my dad, who was a very quiet man, and Ma was so big and so large and such a huge person and came from such an incredibly big Brahmo family, and our lives were full with her. But Baba in his was exactly the same, You know, when I left my first husband, I remember him coming and telling me, it's okay, doesn't matter a damn what anybody says. You've got to do what's right for you, so do it. I'm here behind you. But don't tell Ma that I've said this, okay? So that was fine. But the point is, and she was like that, because I think what she did was she believed in that. And that's really, so I hope the book has created, I can't tell you what a journey it's been, because for everything that I read, you needed to get deeper into understanding what did this mean, actually. The kind of stuff that Utshobananda wrote about her as well, that was a completely different dimension. Then you're trying to understand that relationship. Then what did she do after that? Why did she leave Shibesh, go away, join the school in Kanpur, and then take him back? I mean, he'd been through everything they owned, but it was a sense, and then had a child as well. So it was a sense of duty, it was a sense of, I need to look after him, and he is my responsibility, and whatever. And it was, and I think the biggest challenges that I've faced in writing this book is trying to be truthful without being all emotional and totally over the top. Thank God for Vivek, because he would say, that really sounds a bit extreme, maybe, to think about it. And Anjum, who then said, this is beautiful language, but maybe we can go a little this way. And that's what the book is. That's what the book is, actually. That's what the book is.
I just wanted us to remember a word of caution. This huge romanticism we have about women like Bimola in Tagore, Ghore Baire, Home and the World. You have to take it with a large pinch of salt, because it was not as if the path was made any easier. It was a absolutely widening patriarchy, and I'm talking not just the 19th century, even up to our Indian National Congress. Women were not welcome. The Indian National Congress is cited as an excellent example. There would be one or two naam ke vaste iconic people. Sarojini Naidu, Ar ke chilo. We think the patriarchy made it easier. No. There are histories now being rewritten which show us that people such as Brinda's grandmother was particularly feisty, and although she had her constraints, she never broke them, because she knew that if she broke them, then she had to balance the communities that she was teaching, We just heard the example of those who wore burqas. So they had to be sensitive. And as a single mother, when she was bringing up your father Nikhilesh, she had to be very careful what lines she was crossing. So I just wanted us to remember, oh, it was fantastic, women were being brought in, welcomed with open arms by the patriarchy. No, they were not. We are very, very fortunate that we had people such as Mary Ward in the early 1900s who pushed the point for women's education. And we had Loreto, we had Mary, we had St. Mary's, we had Queen of the Missions, we had schools which, when the missionaries came, this is where it opened a gate for us. So I just wanted us to keep in mind that there has to be a balance in in the way we think of women being ushered in to positions of power.
I think, taking the cue from both Chaitali Di and Julie Di, I'm very strongly reminded of something that Shunil Gangopadhyay writes in Shei Shomoy, where he very clearly says that Bethune College particularly fostered that culture, where it encouraged its students, girl students, to participate in anti-colonial movements, activities, join marches. So that definitely remains. And for me, the book, I shall be very honest, more than the love letters and the relationship between Shobha and Utshavanando, I saw this as the journey of Shobha and into a kind of maturity, where at the end you mention that when your mother visited your grandmother right after their wedding, they would hardly find her at home because she would leave in the morning and she would come back very late, and possibly because she was so committed to her school, to her students, visiting them at house. This selflessness, I see this entire memoir as a journey to that idea of selflessness, which must have been there, as you rightly point out, that very deep sense of responsibility and duty. But somehow I also see her as kind of transcending her very little concerns to embrace a much larger vision.
I totally agree with you. But she was also brought up in an extraordinary family. So is it okay if I read a bit?
Yes, please do read
I'd
whatever
like
you
to
like.
read to you the letter that she received from her father when she told him that she was going to marry Shibesh. That actually is I'm so sorry, but I had written a book with all my markers, which I seem to have lost.
So as Brinda tries to find this letter, just let me try and do a little paraphrase. This letter, I thought was very exceptional because her father is giving her every right to decide the marriage. He doesn't say a no like even many fathers of today do, and he doesn't say a yes. And the credit lies with Shobha, I thought, after. In fact, I was telling Brinda before we had come up on the day that this was so very exceptional. Yes, please.
So this letter actually, I think for me, was possibly it epitomizes what Shobha was and where she came from, and what I think we as her grandchildren and great-grandchildren are grateful for, because there was this kind of thinking. This was written to her by her father. Most of the letters were written by Utshavanando. There were some lovely letters from her friends, and then there were letters from Shibesh also, of course. But dearest Shobha, I was very happy to receive your letter. Before leaving here for Rewa, Jibon, which is her brother, informed me that you are keen to marry Shibesh. And 4 or 5 days ago, I learnt the same from Shuprabha, who was her younger sister. I then mentioned this to Jaganando, who was a very close friend of theirs, and told him that I had a mind to speak to you directly. Jaganando felt you would inform me yourself and asked me not to raise this question with you before that. Therefore, I did not say anything to you, nor do I have very much to say to you. You are now an adult, and by God's grace, you are adequately educated. Now you will be able to judge what will be good for yourself more than any friend or relative. But however learned or wise or educated one is, it is human to err. Therefore, before you decide to marry Shibesh, I would advise you to consider and think on some points. If after you have considered what I must say, you still want to marry this young man, then so be it. I have nothing more to say. In fact, if you are happy at the thought of being married to Shibesh, then I shall be happy and joyful and can have no cause to object. However, what I would like you to know and ponder on are these facts. And he lists out some facts. Shibesh is a committed Nabobidhan boy, and you are a free-thinking, independent-natured Sadharan Brahmo Samaj girl. Under these circumstances, how can you be compatible to each other? The one admits to reaching God through a medium and nurtures this belief, and the other is opposed to this belief. One has a narrow vision, the other is broad-minded. Is it possible for the two to be united? You can say that if Roman Catholics and Protestants can marry, why cannot a Nabobidhan boy marry a Sadharan Brahmo Samaj girl? It is true that the two sects in England do marry, but this is not universal and they do not always allow it. Gradually, a broader view is entered. All sects and the English have a much higher level of thought and a broader mindset than we do. You can understand that. Despite this wider vision, the marriage of Roman Catholics and Protestants is not always congenial. That is why it is found that a Nabobidhan and a Sadharan Brahmo Samaj wedding will also be incompatible. Number 2, if husband and wife have separate beliefs, which faith shall the children follow, if any? If you do marry Shibesh, which form of wedding will it be? Your own relatives will not be able to join in a Nabobidhan ceremony because a Nabobidhan family approaches God through Keshav Chandra Sen, and therefore the Upasana is according to his dictates. It is impossible for the Unitarian Brahmos to participate in such a ceremony. Number 4, do Shibesh's parents or any of his family, or indeed Shibesh himself, have any contagious or hereditary ailments? Who is there in his family? What is their financial situation? Are Shibesh's parents agreeable to you marrying him? It is important to be aware of these facts. I do not know anything about Shibesh, and that is why I ask these questions. Unless Shibesh completes his MA and is settled into earning a living, I feel he should on no account contemplate marriage or even an engagement. To marry, he must be competent to take on the responsibility of a family. Until he is able to take care of an establishment, would it be practical to marry? I must repeat, whatever you do, think over these points carefully. Do not be moved by emotion, as marrying in haste may lead to a future of misery. Consider all this before you tie the nuptial knot. The ultimate step of marriage should not be entered into lightly. If you are certain that you will find peace and happiness with the man of your choice, then, as I have said before, I cannot have any objections. I pray to God that you have his blessings to lead a peaceful, the inner strength to bear all adversities. So this was written by her father 100 years ago. And I'm saying to myself that, wow, so this is who she was. And this is what my father told me when I wanted to divorce my first husband, that you've got to do what's right for you. And I think, so to answer your question, it's just, I remember when we found this letter, we couldn't believe it, the excitement of understanding, because this is who she was. This is the family she came from. It could have been a letter written now.
Yes.
Now.
But he was a very diplomatic father.
Yes.
Very diplomatic.
And she was his favorite daughter, I think, from what I gathered, yes.
So, turning the bend a little bit, I think what appealed to me in this memoir, and I'm very keen to hear, we're all keen to hear what you think. Before we turn it to the floor, I just want to throw the question up there for you, Brinda. Fiscal, equity, class, issues of hardship, which grandmother Shobha went through, cannot be denied. And I am interested in you telling all of us about your meeting with Meena Pishi. Those pages I will never forget. Please go ahead. And then we'll turn it after you.
So I'm sorry that Meena Pishi couldn't come today. I didn't even know I had a Meena Pishi. So when we were looking for these letters and we were trying to find names and put names, we were in the Shadharan Brahmo Samaj, and they said, there's a lady called Meena Mukherjee, and I think she will be able to give you a lot of information because, she knows these things and she's from that time. Meena Mukherjee, who's she? Oh, well, which family are you? Okay, that. I think they may be a relation. Check it out. So I ring up. Can I come and see you? She said, sure. It turns out she was Shobha's brother's daughter. And when I walked in to see her, it was a female version of my father. And she sat there and she looked at me and said, Nikhil dar me, tumi eshecho? Baba, koto bochor hoye geche. How many years have passed? Till today, I'm not quite sure why my father didn't introduce us to his side of the family. Sometimes when I feel cross with him, or I feel cross about the fact that we knew so little, you think that actually, and you can't blame Ma either, but I do know that we know my Ma's family very well. We know all the aunts and all the connections and the Ramesh Chandra Dutt connections and the whole lot and the stamps that were produced and everything. But we didn't know anything about Baba. But when you sat down that day, and Meena Pishi, the stories began to flow and flow and flow. And then she talked about, and what was amazing, I'm really sorry she's not here today because she's not very well. But there was no judgment. She says, Jokon Baba na, when she got married to your mother, she was after all she was a mem shaib. She had come from and there was no judgment there. She says, she came from a completely different background in terms of they came from a different kind of time. She was educated in the West. I mean, she was but your Baba had got into the army, and Shobha said, that this is going to be a good match because she will support him in his career in the army. And I think it was a reasonably good match for a while. I think they make their own equations. They did live together for 60, 65 years. So Shobha said, and when Meena Pishi was telling me this, and I was saying, what was wrong, Baba? This is so, and this is who we are, But she lives in a little place on off Padmapukur on what's her name, Priya? That in one of those Calcutta Improvement Trust buildings. She never married. She's a spinster. She studied in Shantiniketan under Nandan Lal Bose's mother, and she's an amazing seamstress. I mean, her work and her embroidery and her katha and her batik is just incredible. Never married. So proud that she owns this house herself. It's a single-room apartment, 1.5 rooms, and there was perfectly. And I'm sure Calcutta Improvement Trust, when they visualized it, had something. But now when you go up those slightly broken stairs, so they're basically, I don't know whether any of you ever visited buildings like that, but they're basically just a square building like this with a courtyard and 4 floors, and there are literally a corridor that runs along, and there are one room leading out of this. But the pride, and she wasn't at all awkward or embarrassed or even she just sat, and I just sat and listened while she talked about my father, about who she was, about where we had come from. And you realize that there's a point that Nishka made yesterday when we were talking, which maybe I should say here as well. You know, when you talk about one, I used to always think that I've got very strong-minded girls. I'm pretty strong-minded myself. And I used to always think that a lot of this came from my mother, because she's a very strong-minded person herself. And so we have an image of what strong-minded people should be, what strong-minded women are. You know, you're forceful and you're aggressive, and you know all the kind of things like that, and you have a point of view, and that's how it's got to be. But then you meet a Meena Pishi and you sit down and you read about a Shobha and you realize that actually strength is far more than that. And I feel blessed and deeply humbled that this is my lineage and this is what my kids inherited. So for me, it's been that, really.
Thank you. So that's a wonderful segue to call upon the one and only Nishka to be a candid commentator on all this, and your part that you played in the research, I think is quite a significant achievement.
Thank you. I think for my sisters and myself, the journey of Ma writing the book, in the beginning it was one of Ma's projects. Okay, now she's got a new project and off she goes. But we quickly began to understand that this was very different and it involved us. We didn't quite know how. And then when the research started and the delving into the history part started, I think the afternoon that I went with Ma and Papa to the Brahmo Samaj, my grandfather had taken me there when I was about 5 years old. I had no idea where we had gone. I just remember going to this big building where there were people dressed in white and they were singing these beautiful hymns. That's all the memory I have. I must have been 5, 6 years old. And then I came to visit my parents in Calcutta, and they said, we're going to the Brahmo Samaj, you come with us. Came along. And we got out of the car and I looked up and I said, this is the place that Dada Muni had brought me to. I had no idea that it was that. And I remembered what the hall looked like, and it looked exactly like that. And so we go inside, and God bless the Brahmo Samaj and their absolutely meticulous documentation of every single thing that happened with every Brahmo ever, births, marriages, deaths, college graduations, everything. And we were not quite sure of the year that we would find information. So we sat down in that rather large, musty hall, and they have bound the newsletters by year. So Mama took 1 year, Papa took 1 year, and I took 1 year, and we started pouring through the pages. And there, in that page of 1915, graduated from Bethune College, 7 names, one of them was Shobha Mukherjee. And that was the moment, and I'm getting goosebumps even now speaking about it, and that was the moment when it became real for me that here we are on this very historic journey. And for me, the Brahmo Samaj and all of that was in history lessons in school. It was an amazing movement that my family and my great-grandmother had a role to play, and they were part of that, and that was our history. That was a turning point, because we have been brought up, as Ma said, in a very khichurified, Anglo-Indianish, hitch-pitch, multicultural way, which we celebrate. That's who we are. But I think the fact that that today I have, and I'll use the Bengali word, a porichoy that is rooted in this land and here through this book and through this journey, I think for me and my sisters that has been just amazing. That's just it. And Ma's dogged perseverance to chase it to the end. Speak to this one, speak to that one. Okay, we're going to drive to Giridih. Okay, we're going to go to Kanpur. Okay, they've traveled everywhere. They've done everything. And the other turning point was when we went to Shantiniketan and we met Arati Sen at Shantiniketan, and we just sat there in her living room, and she just told story after story about this woman who she knew, who was my great-grandmother. So those are really the 2 points.
So Vivek, if you would give us your wonderful presence. Vivek is a dear friend for 3 years on cyberspace for us, a great reader, avid analyst of literature, also Brinda's husband and the father of 4 girls. Vivek, did you do this because you wanted to just support Brinda, or did you get something more of it?
Thank you, Julie. Well, yes, it did start off as lending a hand as far as the letters are concerned. I couldn't read any of them in any case. So the actual translations then brought a completely different view as far as I was concerned. And I found it really challenging of this part of history being reinvented. And I did, as I often do, I did a lot of reading as well, trying to figure out what was the Brahmo Samaj and what role did it play. I mean, we've always thought about another sect that has come along and gone away. So finding that was certainly, that was a nice, long journey, an interesting journey to do. And then reading books on the leading up from maybe through the 19th century and the early 20th century, just the history of how things happened in Bengal and how the seminal changes took place, and the fact that the opening of minds because of the printing presses, and there's so much of translations that were printed into English and into many Indian languages at the same time. It was just not English itself. And that opened up knowledge right across society. So anybody who had got a smattering of education was able to read the older texts for themselves. They didn't need to be spoken down to. They read it themselves. They took their own, they got their own viewpoints on it. And eventually, I think it became a problem for the British as well, because now you had people who were, arguing back at them, the same arguments that were thrown at them, but much more powerfully on the way back again. So that was an amazing journey. And then the whole journey. I had just retired actually at that point, so we had time on our hands, and we were on the way to move to Bangalore. But in between, we made these journeys, amazing journeys. Spent 3 or 4 days in Giridih, trying to see what Giridih looked like. We saw something of that in the writings, and to try and correlate it with what the actual fact is. Unfortunately, Giridih had obviously gone down hugely from the time when it was a big place in Bengal in the late 19th century. And then on to Shantiniketan. Then we went to Kanpur, went to Delhi, and we had, at one point, it seemed to be going so well that he thought that, there are lots of other things we can be able to see. And a lot of her students who were in their 80s, like we were actually meeting that we should have, if the letters had been looked at 20 years earlier, you've been able to meet so many more people. But that was not, you actually, when you say, would we have read the letters at that point in the same spirit? Probably not. We wouldn't have had the time to do that. So we got that opportunity, and perhaps we were not meant to meet those people who we physically and in person. But the journey itself was amazing.
Thank you so much, Vivek. And Nishka also would like to recognize that Shupriya is here, and Zulfi, pretty much, yes, pretty much the whole family right there. Rifka. Yes, very much so. So how do we do this then? Let's open it up with Amit Cha and Swati Cha. If I might very humbly ask that you keep your observation or your question to about 2 minutes. Is that fair?
I would like to congratulate you for a lovely, lovely book, which I managed to read in 2 days flat, and I couldn't put it down, as I just told you. What I was observing about when I was reading was that, the letters which Utshavanand wrote to your great-grandmother, when he's addressing her as Pranodikari, and
Yeah.
but in one of the letters he's telling her that you are the Devi, and that it's a Shakti, and both of us, Amit and me, we observed that well, he was a Brahmo, So why is he, addressing her as the Devi, as the, the Shakti, and so why would he do that? And why wouldn't he be addressed in a more equal manner? Because he was a free-thinking, so both of us made this observation about, and also the letters somewhere, I felt, of course, they came at a certain time in your book, and after that, the journey was yours. The journey was all yours. Both of us thought that this is about you, This book is more about you, even more than Shobha, So we could see you in every page, almost.
I think to answer a question, I think the relationship between, okay, so let's rephrase that. We had very little information. By the time we got to Kanpur, the school is still there. There was so much infighting between the owners of the school and the government who was trying to take it over that the whole place was in a complete mess. There was a case against it and the doors were locked and they wouldn't let us enter the library and the stairs to the library were broken. But we were lucky to meet a couple of people who were direct descendants of the founder, and they were able to give us some smatterings. And I'd taken photographs and they actually recognized some of the photographs. So those are the kind of, we had to literally eke out the information that we could get. And then when we found this little write-up about her in the Marwari Journal in Kanpur at that time, so there were little things like that. But it was still important for me to understand what was, because the thing is, those are the only letters we have. And she used to write a lot. She used to write to my mother in Bengali, and my mother used to tell us that, as long as she was alive, and she died 2 years after my parents were born, she said, I wrote to her in Bangla, and she wrote back to me. But there's none of that. There's just these letters from that short period of time that's there. So obviously, it meant something serious. The relationship with Utsav Anand was something I really tried to understand, because as you say, but I think, I remember having a discussion with our translator about this and trying to understand it. And I think she was almost, we use the word muse. And that time there was a lot of people who used the word muse. You had Rabindranath Tagore has his muse. And I think maybe the freshness and youth of somebody who looked at him the way she did, and he found that freshness is to be something that he could relate to, and it obviously brought out things in her. And it brought out things in her because she was able to learn, and her mind became that much broader. And I think maybe he came from a very prominent Brahmo family. We have not mentioned their name because the family was not keen that we mention it, so we have not given which family it was. And maybe it was also a time when Brahmanism was actually pretty new in some ways. So I think this whole thing about you being my upasana, you're my prayer, you're my Devi, you're my Shakti, you give me the strength. I think that was also part of what he saw in her. And I remember having a very interesting discussion, again, with my translator about that. And I would say, what goes on here? He's got a wife, he's got children, and he's got lots of children. And then, what is this? Trying to understand it for myself, because I am from this generation. And not to make a value judgment, and not to say, you committed adultery and all this. It wasn't that. And then I understood, because then of course I had to read that much more to try and understand, what do you mean when you say Rabindranath Tagore had a muse? What do you mean that so-and-so was so-and-so's muse? And then you begin to realize that a lot of the wonderful literary figures of that time had relationships with other women who created other aspects of their life, right? So for me, it was understanding that. And then there was no judgment necessary. But I think I have tried to try and understand it in the context. And as you say, the book becomes a lot about you. But actually it is a lot about me as well. Because this book is for my kids to know where we are from and what we did. And I couldn't not have it. There wasn't any information beyond that. And I tried to link it to understand and to try and create parallels in my own life about it, So I hope that answers your question a little bit. Yeah.
I'll just, I just reconfirm, there are no letters written by Shobha,
No.
which you found. That would have really helped you.
Absolutely. And
in
how
your-
we searched, how we tried. Every address we found there, we would visit. Cornwallis Street, of course, knows us backwards and forwards, and every little thing we would say. In fact, we went to the family of Utshavananda. We met his granddaughter, and she said, you know, my father, I was his most favored grandchild, and all this kind of thing. And we said, okay, so do you even have a photograph? Could you look through some old papers? Because just like I found this document, maybe there are some documents. I think they were not happy about it, and they were a bit frozen, so you can't push beyond a point.
But if you had actually found her letters, you wouldn't have gone through this journey. You would
Maybe
have got
not.
all your answers in a box.
That's right.
So she's given you a cosmic.
Brinda, I'll just take this around. So, hi Rini. So, he, who is a scholar, has just done his PhD from Presidency, has read the book. And Camelia, go for it. Keep it short, keep it tight, we have lots of voices.
Hello, and thank you for this wonderful book that you have written. And I have not finished reading it, and I have only a few ideas about where it came from and what it contains. And it is an extremely intriguing subject, and the matter is very, very, like, it is a kind of microhistory which segues with the national history, and I really enjoyed this discussion here. And one question which I had was about the different kinds of Brahmo faith and how they interact. About you just mentioned the I think Navabidhan Brahmo faith, and she married someone from that sect of Brahmoism, and I would like to know a bit more about how these different sects of Brahmoism interacted in her life and in your grandmother's life.
Okay, I think you know that, I think that's what the letter from her father also talked about, the fact that there were two separate, the Brahmo faith was actually, and I'm putting it in a very small way, was actually something that happened because it was like going against or trying to work out what some of the negatives in they were all Hindus after all when Brahmoism came into existence. And I think what it did, because I think that's quite remarkable that she had the broadness of mind to think that although the faiths were separate, yet they came from the same sort of, you can say, mother faith, I suppose. But the reality was that some of the differences were very, very acute as well. I mean, the fact that in the Shadharan Brahmo Samaj, they believed very clearly that there were no idols, and that fact that women needed to be educated. So did the Navabidhan Samaj, but in there, they were a little bit, I mean, that was Keshav Chandra Sen who started the Navabidhan Samaj. He actually, it broke away also because they were fighting against, or at least they declared that girls shouldn't marry before the age of 16. And he actually gave his daughter in marriage at the age of 14 to the Kuch Bihar family. And that's when the Shadharan Brahmo Samaj broke away and said, well, this is not the way it's got to be. So, but I think she came from such an emancipated family in some ways that although the father said, I don't think this is such a brilliant idea, he was also able to see that obviously she would be able to figure out some of the commonalities that they had together, and there would be no. So I don't think there was too much of a dilemma in her mind, otherwise she wouldn't have agreed to want to marry him. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Brinda Kabilia?
So, hi ma'am, it's a really, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I do stay on Cornwallis Street, which you mentioned, at all lengths and etc. So, I would like to ask you that when you revisited the street, how did the place or the space, teach you or reveal anything to you about your grandmother? Like, how did the space welcome you?
It was actually, that's so wonderful about Calcutta, isn't it? Things, some spaces just stand in time, tuck, it doesn't move beyond that. So the house where she lived is still there. And I was actually able to get permission to visit. And the same house is now got lots of little rooms and there are lots of people living there. But the room that she stayed in is still there. So one could look over the Brahma Samaj, into the Brahma Samaj compound. It's in that little gully that goes just next to it. And you could shut your eyes and imagine the tree is still there.
It is there, yeah.
So you can shut your eyes and you can imagine what it must have been like. Of course, there's a lot more. There are tram tracks and there's a lot more buildings. But in spite of that, there is a space. And I think her family lived on that street. And her mother's side were the Roy Chaudhurys, and they were all, again, big Brahmo families. And I think she felt comfortable and comforted. And I have to say that we felt the same. The Brahmo Samaj were amazing. And the library, they just literally, I'm really sorry that nobody from the Samaj is here today. I had hoped that, oh, there you are. Hi, Rahul. So they just opened up. So that's my cousin Rahul at the back. So they actually opened up the library, and it was so welcoming. And that's possibly what the Samaj was like for her as well. So welcoming. And the buildings are beautiful. If you shut your eyes and you don't look at the fact that it's all grimy and grubby, you can just think about it, and it must have been a space where they were comfortable, they were safe, So for me, and the buildings are exactly the same. They haven't changed. There's that house at the back, and there's a house in the front, and there's a library, the same stairs, those amazing photographs all over, and it was quite an incredible experience, yeah.
Thank you, Brinda.
Yeah, you should go sometime. It's
Thank
a beautiful library.
Thank you. That space question always, brings back history and geography intersecting with literature. Wonderful. I have a young scholar here, Shreyosi Das Roy from Loreto. Just finished her master's. Let's see what Shreyosi has.
Hello, ma'am. I've just finished reading your book 2 days ago, and I had a 2-hour long conversation with my mother about it, and it led to my discovery of my own roots from both the maternal and paternal side. And it's my observation that what you have written, your initiative, is not just history, but I would see it as your existence continuing through the book which you have written and also passing it down to your daughters. And my question is a little bit on the personal side. So as I understand, Shobha is your Thakuma.
That's right.
Right. So, ma'am, when you were young, and I'm sure, I think you had seen her picture once or twice before. So, ma'am, how did you perceive Shobha in your childhood from that picture? Because picture is very important. Because the letters, you came across the letters much later. But the picture you had a sense of your grandmother. So, ma'am, what was that like, understanding, knowing Shobha from your childhood to the movement towards your adulthood? What was it like?
That's really an interesting question, because the only picture I had of my grandmother, or that I saw of my father's mother, was a little one of this lady in her white sari cutting shobji on a boti. And that was what was on my mother's dressing table, clipped on there. And that was it. So yeah, that's Baba's mother, there's no big deal. And then we find the letters. And then we find the photographs first. And there's this beautifully dressed lady in her black, just graduated coat, and the Brahmos used to dress in a particular way, and she's standing tall and she's looking, she was just, she was quite tiny, but she was, looking, and I thought, who's this ma? That's your grandmother, that's Shobha. And then you look at this Shobha, and you look at this Shobha, and you say, what was it that went on? What is it that happened from this to this? And that's the journey. I think that really was the point at which I realized that we really need to find this one out, because she's not somebody who's had no. And then, of course, I found the certificate of her graduation. I couldn't believe that. Couldn't believe that she actually graduated. When I went back to Bethune, we found it there as well. So the point is that you suddenly see, oh, this is a different human being, and how does this link with this? So I think that's how the journey started, and to try and do justice to this and this picture of her, the way she was, and a description of her comes to mind of someone who knew her, said, she'd always wear black court shoes, and you could always hear her walking down the corridor in school, tick, 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 korejeto, and you could hear it, and asche, mashima, just quiet everybody, that kind of thing. To this lady who was sitting, and who'd visited my parents briefly, but only once. And my mother tells me how she stood and watched in complete awe. I don't think my mother had ever seen a boti in her life, to see this lady cutting vegetables on her veranda in Pune when she had visited them. So, yeah.
Wonderful. That was really a nice exchange.
Julie, if I can please chip in for a minute.
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
When one of the youngsters asked about the difference, I just wanted to share with everyone that I belong to Bethune College, and the time was 1977 to 79, and we did not have a written down dress code, but saris were definitely encouraged. Please don't get me wrong. That was one point. The second point has something to do with Brinda's sort of observation of her grandma. All sorts of letter writing and little article writing. We had a lot of wall magazines, which brought out, I think, an extra shade of clarity in thoughts, not just the university questions and answers. And this has a link with the confidence that you see in the letters. That is definitely there, and also a sort of assent to spirituality. If you read the poems later on, a lady who has been able to differentiate between falling in love and getting married, and the fact that all falling in love doesn't necessarily lead to a marriage, is able to write a poem called Silence towards the end of the book. I think that is a mark of confidence. Thank you.
If I might add 2 points there, Chaitali, I would never be accepted into Bethune College if I was expected to wear a sari. And the second point is, I think she was absolutely a marvelous poet. Marvelous poet. And the way compassion and kindness, she writes about that. She believes it, and again she enacts it. I want to turn to Anjum, who is the editor of this wonderful book. Anjum, my question to you is, what was the hardest thing you had to do? The changing of the genres or anything else?
Gosh, that's a hard question. I think the hardest thing was to bring a readable, flowing structure to the book without sacrificing the personal tone and the intimacy and the sense of discovery and exploration. There is a naivety which is very clear when Brinda starts off, because she makes it very, very plain that she's not an expert in any of this. I mean, just getting to know what Brahmo Samaj was also a big discovery for her. So, yeah, I mean, she wrote it from that perspective. And there was a struggle about how much information do we need to give, because many people would already know this stuff. Would it then make it very boring to plow through pages, you know? So those kinds of things were very difficult. But to add to that, the most exciting thing for me was getting to know Shobha. I think I still feel that she's somebody I knew. You know, after having worked on it, slowly getting to know her, reading those letters and against the grain, they were all letters to her. And they were responding to her. And how did people read her? How did they view her? You know, so that was very, very interesting for me. And getting to know her as a person. Even now when people were discussing, I'm sitting there thinking, no, she would have thought this. Or she would have said that. You know, it's almost like she's someone I knew. So thank you, Brinda, for that privilege. It was lovely.
Thank you, Anjum. That made a lot of sense. The great educationist. Do you have a comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
But it's like a question. Well, you must be very brave, not only because you've written the book, right? But in 2023, to sit here and say, in our house, nobody spoke Bangla, and it's only English. So what do you speak at home with your own children?
English. My husband's from the south.
No, he may be Sadhana, but you don't speak in Bengali with your
Not
children at all.
No, I don't.
So do you have any regrets?
Yes, some. I have a regret that all the years that I lived in Bengal, I did very little about getting to know my Bengaliness. Maybe because I have 4 girls and we're bringing them all up and they were all in La Martiniere and generally supporting that growth. And then working, and the work I did took a lot of my time and thinking. So, but the regret is, it's not something that eats into me or something burning, but there is a regret that I wish I had spent a little more time getting to know this part of it. Because when Vivek and I got married, we got married in the Brahmo ceremony, and my father was in the Brahmo Samaj, the elder member is actually can perform the ceremony, and he was I didn't know all this, of course. I only knew it when I was going to marry Vivek, that he was and actually considered the eldermost Brahmo Samaj person in Bombay. So he conducted our wedding. So it's always been a big joke between us. Was it really legal? I mean, your father sat there and conducted this wedding. So, but yes, and my mother sang. And she sang beautiful Rabindra Sangeet at my wedding as well. And I never did anything about it. And this was a good year that the book has come out, because I was 70 this year, and I think to myself that this is a good time that it's come out, and it's, yes, there are regrets. The regrets that I wish I had spent a little more time, but it's there. If I really want to do it, I'll do it, to learn to read and write. Luckily, my kids, especially Nishka, she's able to read and write Bengali, but I didn't.
Good for you. Shubhri, I'm going to ask you the same question that Arundhati asked Brinda. Are you versatile in Bengali? Because you're Brinda's sister, are you a little bit more? So it's difficult.
And I have never lived in Kolkata. I was born during my father's tenure when he was posted in Rangoon. And then we've been traveling all around the country, but never in Kolkata.
So you have absolved yourself. Harish.
Yes, I do want to learn it, and I wish that I would. In fact, I was just speaking with my husband, Zulfi, and saying that I want to know more about my roots, not only Shobha, but much more.
Sure. Dr. Harish Mehta?
So did you have any, is there anything in your book that isn't there? I mean, what I mean to say is, did you hold back? Were there things that you wanted to put in, but you didn't? That's one thing. And did you have discussions with your editor or with perhaps your children that there is stuff that I think should go in, but then a part of me says it shouldn't go in?
Well,
were there any discussions of
yes,
this?
actually, when we realized that we wanted to publish this book for a public forum, it wouldn't just stay within the family. And anyway, I think it took a long time with me to even discuss, to even think through the fact that I even wanted to publish it, because it is personal, it is private, it is, you don't want it to be soiled, you don't want someone to pass judgment, you don't want someone to make it small, what was obviously a very big relationship in her life, but that wasn't only who she was. When we realized that, we said it's okay. But of course, there are bits and pieces which are deeply personal, which there is no way will go into a book, because then you really are not being fair. But which I have talked to my children about, and I've told but yeah, there were little bits and pieces which I didn't think were things that I wanted to talk about in public, yeah.
I think this conversation and the dialogue between us all could go on and on, but I think we have time, Brinda, for maybe one more question from the floor. If anybody would like to ask Brinda a question or make a comment, please, Sophie, please.
Yeah, good evening. We've come since a few days to be with Brinda and Vivek as being a part of their family. And with Nishka, she sprung a surprise all of a sudden to her mom and dad. I came quite late into the family. Supriya and I married for the second time. And I know that Brinda was there since 20 years. But after seeing this book and hearing about it, and we've been talking about it since the last 2-3 days at our house, I would say that, as she said, that this book came out from a military box that that my mother-in-law, her mom, gave to her. It was like opening a Pandora's box. And the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle have not been easy for her and Vivek and Nishka to a certain extent to have found the roots and gone from Patna to wherever, Kanpur and Brahma Samaj, etc., etc. I have loved Brinda more because after seeing what she's done for this book and after she's found Shobha. I love you, Brinda. It's a great job you did. Fantastic.
I couldn't say better words than those, Zulfji. Thank you so much. So, Brinda, you have the honor to say thank you to your wonderful guests.
Thank you, really. I didn't expect the book to be, yes.
Who's been half the journey of this book. And maybe you can talk about that, because the way it looks and the way the relationship between the visuals and the text work, I think is really because of that.
Thanks, Anjum. Thanks for reminding me. So the book has been designed and put together by our youngest daughter, Nafisa, who was at the moment in the UK. And she is indeed Shobha's great-granddaughter. She put a lot of her time and energy into thinking it through, reading it, visualizing it, seeing what would give the book the look and the flavor. She'd rejected stuff, pictures she didn't want, and the book is beautifully put together, because that's how Nafisa saw it. And for me, a huge thing, I'm her granddaughter, I've written the book. It's her great-granddaughter who's put it together. I mean, how much better could that be? And Nafisa did it with, she's a very strong-minded child actually, and did it with a lot of, yes, and she put so much into it. It's so beautifully produced, actually. So I must tell her that, thank you for reminding me to say that. And I'd like to thank you all, I told Nishka, better give me a hanky because I might just burst into tears, because it's been such a journey, such an amazing journey. And I never expected people to react the way they did. Thanks to both of you, to be able to see that it wasn't just a book about a person who was my grandmother. We all have grandmothers, we all have letters, but to see what I tried to do, to try to create a space and to give me a sense of identity and to give my girls that. And I have to say, I mean, I know I've thanked them, people in the book, But this wouldn't happen if Vivek hadn't been with me along every step of the way. I would burst into tears, or I'd get emotional, or I'd throw a fit about something, or something other happened. Drove us to Giridi, coming back, pissing with rain. And there we were. Meena Pishi singing at the back, one Rabindra Sangeet after that. He said, this music really sounds a bit dirge-like, but okay, sorry, go for it, And so the book remained what it didn't become one horrible emotional morass, because and then the amount of reading we did together, and he did beyond that, because he said, God, and then we found stories about my father. So then he rings up people that he knows and Priya knows, and then gets more stories and looks up all about Indonesian history, and is your father mentioned there? So.
Thank you again, Chaitali and Subhashree, my colleagues, and the last word of thanks does go to Dr. Harish Mehta, who at very short notice opened up the doors with Rising Asia Foundation and Journal and really embraced us all in. Thank you so much.
আমি ভুবন ভ্রমিয়া শেষে আমি এসেছি নূতন দেশে আমি অতিথি তো